Hello, AP Psychology students. Mrs. Mathers coming to you today with a recording on dissociative disorders and somatoform disorders. Um, so, um, Dissociative disorders are a fragmentation of personality due to psychological factors. These are almost always a response to trauma or extended abuse. So what this fragmentation means is that you're almost having like an out-of-body experience. Your consciousness is dissociating from whatever it is that you're experiencing physically. And so there are some different types of dissociative disorders and different manifestations of ways that this fragmentation occurs. The first type of dissociative disorder is called depersonalization disorder. This is the most common of the dissociative disorders. This is when someone is experiencing a trauma, or even sometimes after they develop the disorder, they will just have this sense of unrealness concerning their self or their environment. It's like they don't feel like they're a part of it, like they feel like they're watching it, or they might even feel like a deadness, like they're not physically engaged or psychologically engaged with whatever is going on in the environment. Now, this can happen to any of us if we are having a car accident, for example, and our car is tumbling over and we feel like we're watching from above. I've had an out-of-body experience during a traumatic experience that I had, but I just had one. And that's okay. That's not a disorder. That is a normal psychological event to help us deal with a trauma. But if it continues and it becomes maladaptive, then you might develop depersonalization disorder. So this may accompany a life-threatening physical trauma, such as something like a car accident or something like a assault of some type. And the reason it happens is that your consciousness cannot take the pain, just can't handle the pain of that event, and so it separates out. It's kind of hard to describe, but I think it's possible that some of you may have had a single experience of that. We get concerned when it begins to interfere with life and you have it a lot, like you're sitting in class and you depersonalize and you don't know what just happened for the last 10 minutes or so. Um, Dissociative amnesia is another type of dissociative disorder in which you have a loss of personal information up to and including a stressful or traumatic event. You can form new memories, but you can't remember things about your identity. The Bourne movies were a good example of this. If you ever watched Bourne Identity, any of the Jason Bourne movies, I think there's something called 51st Dates or something like that that might be about this. Um, so you can form new memories, but it's kind of like your life starts over right after the traumatic event. Now, this can reverse suddenly. And so by showing, like if someone shows up in the hospital and they don't have any identification and they are identified through media, the loved ones of that person can come in and show them pictures of their lives, and all of a sudden it will come back, their knowledge of themselves and their life. This happened to a colleague who actually was coming to Edina High School to do a staff development event, and he ended up getting in a car accident on the way to the event, and he talked about having dissociative amnesia, and he was a psychologist, and he said it was a pretty weird experience to not have any knowledge of who he was. Dissociative fugue is another completely inexplicable type of dissociation. In this one, a person will travel away from their home. So there was a case of a man, I think he was in Ohio, and he ended up in Nebraska. And he assumed a completely new identity, got married, completely had blocked out his life before the traumatic event occurred and started this new identity. He didn't even seem disturbed by it. This again can reverse suddenly. and the person does not appear disturbed. They otherwise seem quite comfortable. Um, so this is more common. Most common you would find during war or a natural disaster, let's say a large hurricane or one of the tsunamis that hit Asia. People might just wander away from devastation like that and begin a whole new life. It's not very common now with the identification systems that we have for finding people and connecting them back with their loved ones. When it does end, and it ends abruptly, they may not recall what happened during their fugue state. So this guy who went to Nebraska, when he wakes up and goes, "Why am I here? I'm from Ohio." It's pretty confusing. I do have some case studies on this that we normally would do in class, but it is something that happens, rare, but it does happen. The most difficult one to understand and the most controversial one is multiple personality disorder. The official name for it is dissociative identity disorder, or DID. DID is characterized by someone having two or more distinct personalities. These personalities not only are distinct in the way that they behave, but they're distinct in their names. So I have attached to Schoology 2 videos of people with DID, and I really want you to watch that so that you can have an idea what DID is like. Originally, the original personality is unaware of the other personalities. After therapy, what the therapist will try to do is get the individual, the original personality, to become aware of the other personalities. And this can take a lot of time. And when you watch the videos, you'll see that these personalities oftentimes look very, very different. In a video that I used to have, there was a woman named Christine who had developed multiple personalities, and she had little Chrissy. And when Chrissy would come out, she would talk like a 2-year-old. And then she had another one that was like her protector, and she was an older woman, and she was a tough woman. And so she would have very different voices depending on which personality was being expressed. Other personalities can be conscious of each other. There's a case of a man named Bill Green, and he's on an old VCR tape, which has not been put onto DVD. I don't have a way to show him to you, but he was dating a woman, and like Frank liked her and William didn't, and they would talk to each other. It's very difficult to understand this, but this is what is reported by people with DID. So they each have their own identity, their own name, their own age, their own behavior. Some might wear glasses, some might not. It's really quite remarkable. It is a controversial diagnosis. There is evidence of different brainwave patterns as someone transitions from one personality state to another. The reason it's controversial is that the first patient, her name was Chris Sizemore, she was the first patient diagnosed with multiple personality disorders. And after her diagnosis, and then a movie made about her called All About Eve, and then another movie called Sybil about another woman with multiple personalities, it was discovered that these women actually had therapists who suggested to them that they develop different personalities. And so some psychologists think that this particular disorder was socially constructed through media portrayals of people with multiple personality disorder. I think there's enough evidence now to convince me that it does exist and that DID is a real thing. But I think the history of the disorder is interesting. And this is basically why I said that people might not trust the diagnosis of DID, and that's because it's believed that personalities may be induced by suggestive therapists. All right, so please go to Schoology and watch one of the videos on people with GID. It doesn't matter which one, just one of them is fine. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.